for people, for crews to work. You know, if we're going to have a lot of these very hot, dry days or hot, humid days, can they work out during the day? Are there, you know, in places like Arizona, they already have road crews working a lot of time at night because it's just too dangerous to work during the day. We're going to have this sort of strange balance, or it seems like two sides of a coin, where on the one hand, more when we do have precipitation, they might be more intense, but then they might not happen as frequently, or regular rain might not happen as frequently. So then we will have drought. So all these things kind of stress, you know, they can stress buildings, they can stress vegetation. So these are things we're going to look at. And some of the things that have, say, come out of it is the county actually now has a heat policy for staff. So there's extra consideration when I think it's when the temperatures get above maybe 90 or so, there's extra reminders about being careful. So while a lot of climate change and issues like people think about buildings and cars, people obviously are very important too. Turning a little more back to nature, this, sorry, it's a little bit blurry, I think, but in some areas or some vegetation areas of the county, around our buildings, which are primarily actually in Iowa City, we followed the method that a lot of credit to Tyler and his group, that they've been using this method called no maintenance, and you can take turf out and put in just a selection of plantings that just work really well. They don't require a lot of care, and then it's better for the soil and better for the environment. And that's at the courthouse. You can, I'm not sure what it looks like right now, but you know, if you're in downtown, you could take a tour around there and see how it's doing. And one thing we really have prided ourselves on is we do a lot of reduce and reuse. This is just like a simple internal, we call it the surplus store. And so somebody has some supplies they're not using, they can bring them up here and then people can take them. This is currently on hiatus because, as some of you may know, we're out of our administration building right now while it's being redone. But we have saved thousands of dollars and kept all of this, you know, out of the landfill. And at times we've been able to share some of this through nonprofits. When we got ourselves out of the administration building last fall, we also worked with the Iowa Waste Exchange. And if you're not familiar with them, I really encourage you to get to know them. If you ever are, they have things available that people can arrange to take, and you also can share. The county has a comprehensive plan, and these are documents. You know, the city of Iowa City has one as well. Most of the cities have them, and these help guide. They're sort of visionary documents, and then they help guide different aspects of government, of services, and provide the basis usually for regulations. So on the left there, you see the original volume that came out in 2018. It includes these 6 categories, one of which is sustainability. And on the right is the new proposed volume. It's an update, and I'm not going to be able to talk too much about it because I can't steal the thunder. We're going to our Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday. So if you want to hear more about that, tune in at 5:30, and you'll hear about the differences between the update and the old one. But I can show you, like, these are the existing 6 goals, and you can see they touch on things like natural resources, resiliency, climate change, conservation, renewable energy, the things we've been talking about. And again, it provides the basis for having regulations and being able to put out programs. Just a reminder, again, these are some of the categories. And so some of these things we obviously do externally. And we have done a greenhouse gas emission for the whole of the county. Now, I can't give you any numbers for specific cities because the way we have to calculate the data, calculate the numbers, is looking at the whole. We don't have numbers for each city that we add up. Iowa City does have its own inventory. And the values, we use 2010 as the baseline year and 2020 as the comparative year, which was a little bit challenging because, as we all know, that was a COVID year. Things weren't entirely normal. And then in many cases, the data we have to use is proxy data. So the important thing in that respect is, like, as long as you're using like the same kind of proxy data year to year, you can start to see trends, but just a little caution that though you see those 2 years there, 2010, 2020, some of the information might be from 2018 because it's just not tracked on an annual basis by other entities. The big takeaway on it, as you can see, in that past decade, we decreased from by about 28%. And I think that obviously that's a good thing. And some of the reasons, again, which I had mentioned earlier about the increased use of wind for electricity, decreased use of coal, and other reasons, there are a lot of places switched to LEDs, and it might not seem like much to have one light bulb change, but a lot of light bulbs adds up to a significant difference. Adding the solar, and agriculturally, there were some changes in what was being farmed. And we think there were, I'll talk a little bit about what happened in transportation. So these give you, oh shucks. Let's see. There you go. So all the sectors there, the 6 sectors in which we measure, they all had decreases with the exception of solid waste. And that's a very small part of overall emissions. And I'm going to leave that. I don't know, Jane, are you going to talk about that a little bit? But I think all we can say there, while there was an increase, it's pretty much commensurate with the population increase we saw across the decade within the county. So it's sort of to be expected. And actually, there was still a slight decrease per capita. And with the others, you see pretty significant decreases, almost in half for commercial and industrial, and a quarter for residential. Transportation did not go down much. And we think that's probably because people tend to be driving larger vehicles. And the 2020 data, not all of it was COVID year exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do this again, if unfortunately it might be blipping back up. So that's something we want to pay attention to. And then the agriculture went down a little. The stationary fuel, that category basically encompasses the university's power plant. And since they've been switching off of coal, there's been a nice decrease there. And again, I know this slide is hard to see a little bit, but I would just focus on the colors there. So you kind of see the light blue and the purple, and they flip basically from 2010 to 2020. And what you're seeing there is the dominant sector of what's resulting in greenhouse gas emissions changes. So it's no longer purple. It's transportation, which was the second most largest, actually becomes the largest proportionally. And that's because we saw really good decreases generally in buildings, and transportation didn't move as much. But and here's the drum roll, I hope, for Green Iowa AmeriCorps. Among the many good things they do, they are helping folks do things like energy audits to continue to bring that, people can learn what in their home they can do to change the energy use, get those bulbs in, maybe get a different kind of furnace, do insulation. So Iowa City started this great program, and they have been generous enough to allow us to partner with them. So we're kicking in some funds. And I don't do any work other than make sure they get the check. So a little bit of PR, but the teams go out. Those of you who are in Iowa City, you can get information on doing an audit in your own home. And it's a really good way, to start with your own place. We also have had programs where we're giving money to like the nonprofits so they can do similar things like energy efficiency, new furnaces. Current program has ended, the one that you can see we gave out about $82,000 in funds, and there's a new ARPA-based one that Mondays is going to be a really big day. We got the comp plan. This program is going to be launching, so where there'll be a focus on conservation and sustainability projects. And this one is one that natural organizations that have like natural lands may want to look into. We also in the past have had what's called solar group buys, and this is just a program where we get one installer who can start out with kind of a slightly lower rate than what you might get if you're just going out into the world and finding an installer. And then as more people join on, the price decreases a little bit. So we did 3 of those in 3 different years. One of them we've always done them in collaboration with Iowa City and some of the other cities. The last one we did was in collaboration with Lynn County, so it was really quite wide. And you can see there are close to 1,400 people have come and just learn about solar. We've added just in Johnson County, almost 1.6 megawatts, and that's 240 households in our city through these programs have gotten the solar. And it is to say within the city, it's within the county. The other thing that we have worked on in the past several years is updating what's called our utility scale solar, and also getting battery storage regulations in place. And these are not going on somebody's home. Obviously, these are larger installations that are feeding into the grid, the electrical grid, or being used locally. If you've ever driven down Old 218, Oak Crest Hill, is it Oak Crest? I forget the name of that. There's an installation that's owned by Mid-American that's about 3 megawatts. This one is actually down in the southwest part of the county. We have to make sure that our regulations strike that balance where these can be put in safely, that at the end of their useful life, they can return to ag land. As you can see, this one just has grass, but the newer ones, we're requiring them to put in seed mixes so that the vegetation is more like what used to be covering all of Iowa, and hopefully help provide like habitat for pollinators and help the soil do a better job of absorbing water. Another big thing we have been working on is there's a national federal program, climate pollution reduction grants. These went to the states, but only a handful of states, including Iowa, basically said, we don't want the money. So the state of Iowa didn't take it. And instead, the money went down to these smaller units, which they call them metropolitan statistical areas. So it's kind of confusing. So there's the Iowa City metropolitan statistical area, but it actually includes the whole of the county plus an adjacent county. We have joined with the Cedar Rapids MSA, which also wanted to be able to access these funds. And we're working with the ECI COG. We have completed that first step, which is putting out a priority climate action plan and identifying ways we can do more energy efficiency in buildings, in both residential and municipal, work on some EV projects. And then the second part is the asking of money for that. There will be a more comprehensive plan that comes out of this, and that's something I hope you can watch for and see. You can come and give your input. Another external facing program that we have is our soil health program. And you can see the difference here, lawn on the right and lawn on the left. This actually is a lawn in Iowa City, but we just happen to, we had this photo as an example. So on the right, what the program assists with is you do it's called deep tine aeration, then you put some compost over it and it works its way into the soil. And it's just it's greening it up without using chemicals. So that's a benefit for the soil and a benefit for our water, but because then you're not getting runoff into the stormwater system. There are funds for that for anybody, I think right now, except for North. So Coralville and Iowa City have their own programs, and then the county covers all of the other cities with exception of North Liberty, which just, they ran out of their funds. But these programs that we're going to be renewing ours. And it's obviously making a difference. There are 2 other programs we're going to be doing that are related to soil health. One is called Prairie Pockets, and if you're in the unincorporated area, you'll be eligible, and that's to help put like a 10 by 10 plot within your yard somewhere where you can basically grow prairie. We'll be working with master gardeners on that. And then in the right of ways, we'll be doing some testing, being able to compare just traditional vegetation in right of ways versus where they've been able to put in more varied vegetation, and what is that doing to the soil? What is the quality? We manage stormwater, obviously need parking in places, but some of our regulations we've been able to improve over the several years so that where you do put in parking, it's not creating erosion and other kinds of runoff that create contamination. We work also with watersheds. So those are, watersheds don't know what county they're in, so you would need to work across county lines. And we work on several of those. And I love this example. This is, so I'm obviously not doing all of these things. Some of these things I'm helping make them. This one is solely like secondary roads. They have done a great job of thinking about reuse. And this is using an old, I think it's kind of like from a rail card, and they use that to create a bridge for just a pedestrian and bicycle trail. So some of these things are not very obvious because like you're literally going over them, but there's hidden sustainability projects. We have worked sustainability also into our economic development planning. This is the first ever economic development plan that was adopted by the county in 2022. And I can say, as someone who came from a sustainability background, it's been interesting. I get to wear different hats, and I'm just thankful I had some of the basics from my family teaching me how to balance a checkbook and think about how money works. So all these things help. But in any case, there's aspects in there that focus on sustainable development and how thinking about how climate change will impact businesses. And one thing I noticed this past summer was a lot of folks had to cancel events, right? There's extreme heat. And some of those things, you know, how are you going to accommodate them if they were outside? You have to think about things moving indoors. There may be impacts on crops and on other aspects of businesses. And so in a way, I'm almost at the end here, and this is just to show you in 2017, when the US was pulled out of the climate agreement, we're since back in it. Our county, the leadership made a commitment that they wanted to uphold some of the goals in that, which, you know, it's the central thing about climate change is trying to keep that increase below a tipping point. We're, on the one hand, I mean, to be blunt, we're not fully succeeding, but at the same time, I don't want people to think like their efforts don't make a difference, because they do. We need to keep trying. February was fun, right? 70 to be out in shorts, but I don't think we want all our Februarys to be full of 70-degree days up here in Iowa. And so while those inventories, those greenhouse gas inventories give us numbers, we want to be using that to figure out how we can work together and get change. And one thing that did come out of that was that if we worked with a ICLEI, which is an organization that puts together climate change. They do a lot of things, but one of the things they do is they have software that lets us do the calculations. And they said, like, one thing, like, if we really want to try to do our absolute best, we would have to like decrease emissions by almost half by 2030. So it's 2024. So in a way, the pressure is on, but we do have, you know, things like the Inflation Reduction Act, Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, things there's funding to get a lot of things done. And that wraps up all of my talk. And I guess, I don't know if we're doing questions later or whatever. So if there's any questions, otherwise, we can. So some of them so I'm not I am not the expert on that. That's my colleague Casey Hutchinson. But I think I know from having done soil testing for my own home and some other projects, and I don't know, maybe tell you, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're looking at, you know, the amount of phosphorus and nitrates. Like, is it things can get overloaded with nutrients. It's a little bit like vitamins, you know, too much of a good thing is not. Well, when we had that program, multi-unit housing was also eligible. The challenge is more if it's rental multi-unit, where you don't own it and you'd have to have the owner be involved. But we could, if somebody had wanted to, I think usually they weren't participating in these programs because those buildings are already going to be larger. So they're usually getting the economies of scale anyway, because they have to put so many more panels on that they would achieve, they would sort of get the normal discount anyway. So we didn't see, I don't think we saw, that program I did lead, but I didn't, I don't think we had it. We might have had a duplex, but, yeah, but we are looking, I mean, some places are looking into ways to help bring solar to units where it's rental. It's a challenge, you know, it's an important part. We hope, well, we hope that that will be the case. You know, some areas we will need, you still need some turf grass. Some of it is frankly, when you're dealing with like snow, you have to have somewhere to put it. Sometimes that can be put on top of certain types of non-turf landscape, but when they were building the Guide Link Center, remember, I think one of the people might have been one of the, I don't know, someone on the land architect, it was, and I think they had just moved here from someplace that didn't get a lot of snow, and we kind of had to say, like, we need space to put mounds of snow, maybe not every winter, but so that would be one thing. And then depending on also the building use, around some of our buildings, we do need to be a little bit careful about, we can't have super high and dense vegetation for safety reasons. And but we do hope to see more of that in the future. And they are using it, the historic Power Farm is incorporating these types of things like biocells at that site. And if you haven't been out to the historic Power Farm ever or lately, it's down Melrose, but actually if you ever need, going to the landfill, it's on the way there. You can park there and there's trails you can walk and see some of these features. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. The road.
Cool. All right, let's see. Can everybody hear me without the mic? Excellent. Former theater kid, I know how to get, right? Okay. So hello, everybody. My name is Zachary Love, and I am going to be doing a presentation that is a little different than everybody else's. I'm not affiliated with county or the city. And so my presentation is going to be more about how individuals can partake in organizations that can train them to be a leader in sustainability and how to be successful in sustainability as a career. So, for the people that don't know me, hi, Tyler. Again, my name is Zach. I am a graduate student here at the University of Iowa in the Geographical and Sustainability Sciences Department. I also received my bachelor's in science here and environmental science, particularly on the biosciences track. I also got a certificate in sustainability and a certificate in geographical information. So thanks for that one thing. Making maps and doing spatial analysis. And I have always had a passion for the outdoors, for the environment, and even sustainability as a child. And I have so this, I don't know if you can read it all that well, is a note that I wrote my mother about 20 years ago, so I was about 7 or 8 this time, in which I said, Mom, I love the new rollerblades you bought me for Christmas. I plan to use them this summer. Now that I have another way to go somewhere, I will feel like I'm helping to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Thank you for buying me these lots of new rollerblades. Love, that club. In case you didn't see from that. Unfortunately, my handwriting also still looks like that. So, about me, that is non-academic. I love foraging. This is me with a giant puffball that I managed to score while bringing in some trail cameras. So imagine me walking around campus with a giant basketball size mushroom in my hand. I love to visit our local parks, natural areas, especially in autumn when we have beautiful foliage. I love to do fermentation projects, especially wine here. I love to garden, and I love to be out on the water. So, given that, let's see. Ooh, too far. So Becky talked about all these fantastic programs and projects that the county is doing to achieve sustainability. But what is sustainability? Anyone from the audience? Oh no, I know it's scary. I'm interacting with you. Anyway, when you think sustainability, what comes? I'm okay with that. Yeah, making things last. I like that. So, yeah, all very good stuff. A kind of basic general definition that we can use for specifically this instance today at this event is sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this was, I think, 97, the UN Statute, 87. There are some more sophisticated or more specific definitions that people that specialize in sustainable fields might use, but for today, sustainability, we can go with that. So what exactly am I going to be talking about? I'm kind of have split this up into 3 portions. First part being first, my service in Green Isle AmeriCorps, and then how I translated skills and things that I learned through my public service to my own personal life and being more self-sufficient and sustainable. And then the last is how I would say how I have, or what have I learned and how has that translated into me going into sustainability. So this first part, service. I think this quote really does a fantastic job at encapsulating why I chose to do Green Iowa AmeriCorps. So Dr. Saeed Mohammed Hisham Hussein Al-Masadi, that's a long one. Quote here, volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy. You vote in elections once a year, but when you volunteer, you vote every day about the kind of community that you want to live. Right, so, you know, we vote for city council every year, every 2 years. We vote for the president at 4, senators at 6, of the representatives at 2. And unfortunately, if there is no election year, all our experienced election years have only marginal party unbearable, but I believe that's true. Right. But no, so yeah, through volunteer work, you know, I'm able to actually change on a daily basis rather than, oh, I'm going to vote for somebody that may or may not be able to pass certain policy, right? So my Green Iowa AmeriCorps service, I served 4 summer terms, and I think the total hours served ended up being close to 1,500 hours. The contract was 300 hours per summer, but oftentimes went over. My first term was, in the city of Cedar Rapids, and the Green Iowa site in Cedar Rapids is the Matthew 25 Urban Farm. The urban farm is located in the Pine Tech neighborhood, so that is the neighborhood that is directly northwest of downtown, and that was the area that was most impacted by the flood. And what did I learn through that experience? Well, most of it was meeting. It was a chemical-free, or is a chemical-free operation. But I also learned a lot about food sustainability, right? And that neighborhoods that are low income often tend to be food deserts. What does that mean? They don't have as easy access to sorry, I'm on my website. That should be fine. So, anyway, these areas tend to be food deserts, people in some areas, and what that means is they don't have as much access to healthy nutritional food. And one of the big things that I learned is through interactions with the community members that live in this area and understanding the financial barriers that are really hard to overcome for them, so that they do have access to healthy nutritional food instead of, fast food or convenience store food. So for my Iowa City experience, I largely focused on environmental education. Environmental education, one for me, is a lot of fun. I really love doing it. It's my passion. And it's extremely important, especially because younger generations, especially in urban areas, tend to undergo a phenomenon that's called extinction of experience. So what is that? It just refers to a phenomena in which people lose an affinity or ability to receive benefits from being exposed to nature through the process of not interacting or knowing about nature. And this is especially more apparent in younger generations, because I go outside and I can get my dopamine from right here and watch a Minecraft video, right? K-5 groups is generally what I love to work with the most, because they ask the best questions, like, what's it real? When was the last time any of your adult friends asked you what's your favorite thing? Exactly. Also, the reactions are so much fun. I take my vermicompost bin out there, so that is composting through, we're using worms, giving them our vegetable scraps. Reactions, right, they range from, ew, to, oh my God, worms, right? So I did a lot of environmental ed here in Iowa City, and that can take place in various forms. So down here in the center is my individual project I did for my science up in Cedar Rapids. I made a bee hotel, called Bees, and a little pedestal with some information, and then I also planted some native flowers and grasses. Unfortunately, Canopy no longer exists because for some reason they had to remove it so they could build a new fence that they really didn't need to build. Please don't ask me how I feel about it. Other ways that this environmental ed can take place is through events like this middle top picture here, where a naturalist brings the owl and the other raptors and the reptiles and the creepy crawlies and the presentations, and has the ability for children and community members to interact with these wild animals. The top right picture there is at, I think it was a party in the park. Everybody loves party in the park, right? And at party in the park, I often did smaller activities to grow knowledge and kind of natural sciences. So those things were like, basic tree identification skills based off of leaves. They're doing the stream table presentation and talking about erosion control, and why stream health is so important to things beyond the things that live in the stream. And then, of course, also some more traditional sustainability, conservation type work. I organized a street cleanup that was actually pretty successful. We got 7 bags of trash, and then with Tyler, we did honeysuckle removal out at Ryerson Woods, and now Ryerson Woods is much more open and breathable than it was prior. So, AmeriCorps, so the term, what did I learn? I learned about food sustainability and how unsustainable our food system can be, especially to those that are the fortunate than average, and then also the importance of environmental. So, how did I translate that into being more sustainable as an individual? Self-sufficiency. Like I said earlier, love to garden. I mean, look at that row of cabbages. You see how happy I am. That cabbage is almost 7 pounds, which, by the way, is a lot of cabbage for an individual to go with before it spoils. So how do I avoid spoilage? I learned fermentation techniques. This is me making sauerkraut. I also do, canning and other forms of preservation. Some beautiful chilies here that I do with all these chilies. I made hot sauce. So I go to the store and pay for hot sauce that was shipped there as vehicles and was made with produce that was grown with industrial machines and industrial chemicals. I can just grow stuff to make my own hot sauce 3 blocks from my apartment, right? I also learned how to use some apple dye, which is a goldenrod dye, and then I also learned conversion techniques. Again, why go to the store and get mushrooms when I can go to Hickory Hill and get mushrooms, right? In addition to lowering the carbon footprint and larger carbon impact on the globe, you're out in nature. You're out receiving benefits of nature, right? So, how does all of that translate into making a career in sustainability? So to think about this, we have to think about things that are required for successful sustainability projects. And this comes in the form of 5 key competencies: system thinking competence, interpersonal competence, anticipatory competence, normative competence, and strategic competence. So what are they? Well, in a nutshell, system competence is how phenomena interact with each other. And kind of imagine like a web of interaction. So let's say Tyler wants to plant a bunch of trees in sustainability method called urban greening, making urban centers and urban areas more green to derive benefits from vegetation. So, all right, we're planting our trees. That's one little bubble over here. And that has an effect on air quality over here, right? Trees breathe in air pollution and exhale clean air. Urban heat island effect. There was recently a citizen science project in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids that was it NOAA? Yes. That was organized by those two and to map out urban heat island effects. So areas with less vegetation tend to retain more heat and retain it for longer periods of time, making urban centers more warm than they should be. Trees, they have a cooling effect. They provide shade. They lessen that. But then we have our other bubble over here. Urban greening also tends to induce gentrification, right? So more green equals higher property values, equals pricing low income people out and causing, effects from systemic socioeconomic. Second, anticipatory competence, pretty straightforward. What does the future look like if I intervene or if I don't? Right? Norm. So normative competence is being able to identify what is wrong, what are the facts surrounding it, who is the most impacted, and why are they most impacted. Strategic competence, again, pretty straightforward. This is the ability to successfully make a plan, right, to solve a problem using sustainable methods. And finally, interpersonal. This is the ability to collaborate across disciplines and know who needs to be involved and when they need. And so I was able, through my Green Iowa AmeriCorps experience, able to grow in each of these competencies, and also through my education. For example, systems thinking. I'm an environmental scientist in the College of Prairies. I have to be able to map out complex interactions. Interpersonal competence, my AmeriCorps training, I was able to get to know people like Tyler and Megan and a couple of times, and have since collaborated with Tyler on some of my own academic stuff. For anticipatory competence, again, if that's my education, if I'm going to do a statistical analysis, I have to be able to predict certain outcomes, right? Have a hypothesis. People scientific method, right? With hypothesizing. For normative competence, again, this is informed by my experience in AmeriCorps and being able to do outreach and engagement with the public. I was able to know the community and know what sustainability issues they were facing as related to food access. And then for strategic competence, again, for AmeriCorps, I would do individual projects, and that requires the ability to identify a problem, make a plan that makes sense, and execute that plan. And so going forward in my career, I'm able to draw on the experiences that I've had as an individual to make a broader impact on my community and hopefully make more sustainable community. Now, to close, I graduated 2 months and I'm looking for a job. So if anybody is hiring or knows people who are hiring and do their environmental applications, geospatial analysis or geospatial analyst type positions, anything like that, let me know, because I have $36,000 of student debt that I need to pay. So with that, thank you very much. And any questions? Yeah. So Green Iowa has changed a lot very quickly. And when I first started, it was just, you're Green Iowa AmeriCorps, good for you. But now there are 3 different programs. Oh, did it change again? Okay, what did it change to? It's one program, okay. So when I did it for the latter service terms, it was community and energy, land stewards and sustainable schools. And so the sustainable schools program was the program that would partner with local school districts and specific schools and carry out any school garden activities. For my first term, when it was just Green Iowa, Matthew 25 partnered with the schools to do school gardens, but that was like 7 years ago, so I don't know the status of that. But historically, there have been attempts to do school gardens. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. All the snacks and things that no, my phone won't. Okay.
All right. All right, my presentation is going to be a little bit shorter. I was asked to keep it pretty short, which is totally fine. Plus, you have all these lovely presenters that like to go more in depth in their expertise. I am not an expert on Prairie or on composting or transit, but they are more equipped at talking about their programs than I am. I'm Megan Hill. I'm the Climate Action Engagement Specialist for the City of Iowa City. Our division is tasked with overseeing implementing the Climate Action Plan. I'll get into the timeline a little bit and a little bit about the plan. And some of the successes we've had. Like I said, the other presenters will go into more detail about their specific areas about what they do. You can hear me okay, right? Okay, cool. I'm pretty loud. So this shows the general timeline leading up to the creation of the first climate action plan. So as you can see, it started October 2007 when the mayor signed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. From there, we had little steps, and then finally, August 2009, Iowa City completed our first greenhouse gas inventory, and this is actually the first greenhouse gas inventory in the state of Iowa, so pretty proud of that. And the two reports, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a green one and this golden orange one. Those are the greenhouse gas inventory reports originally written. These reports are all on our website if you're interested. The gold one is all about city emissions, so related to city buildings, operation, our transit system, etc., is in that report. And then the green one is all about community emissions. So all the emissions that the city does not have direct control over. So homes, apartments, businesses, nonprofits, schools, all of that, and transportation from personal vehicles, all of that is in that report. We also collaborated on this really colorful report, which is Climate in the Heartland. And that report really looked at how can people prepare and adapt to climate impacts here in the Heartland. And finally, this last report is about consumption online. So it looked at Iowa City residents and our consumption online. So think Amazon and Target and things like that. And I'm sure it's grown more since the pandemic, but what this report found at the time was if everyone on Earth consumed like Iowa City did in 2013 online, we would need 4 Earths to sustain those activities. So from there, City Council decided to set emission targets. And then they're like, we really need to figure out how we can get to these goals and achieve our targets. So let's set up a steering committee. So they got together a steering committee of local experts, stakeholders. They met, they researched, talked to each other, talked to other stakeholders, and they provided community input meetings actually here at the library. You can see 2 pictures below the slide. Those are a couple input meetings. I think there were 3 or 4 input meetings altogether, if I remember right. That was 2017, 2018. So community members got to provide feedback on what they liked about the plan, the proposed actions. They got to vote, yes, I'll do this personally. Yes, I think the city should do this. I don't like this. And then they also got to write physically what they like other items. I was lucky enough to be in Green Iowa AmeriCorps at that time. And I was a part of the input meetings, which were really fantastic. And one of my colleagues put Green Iowa AmeriCorps energy audits in the plan. And the steering committee really took everyone's feedback because that is in the plan today. So finally, the city council adopted the plan when it was written in 2018. So like any climate action plan, it takes a long time. And the first climate action plan, initial one that we have on our website today, has a goal to reduce emissions about 20% by 2025 and 2050 by 2050 reduce them by 80%. There are only 35 actions in this first plan to achieve those goals, and they're spread between 5 different categories. So the plan was pretty outdated once it was published. The IPCC report in 2018 called for an accelerated actions to curb climate change. City Council in August of that year saw this report. They decided to align our targets with IPCC's report. So that is 45 reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Those are our current targets as well. We haven't changed them yet, but city staff was asked to write a new report within 100 days to talk about how we can achieve these new goals. The original plan was out of date. We needed a supplemental plan. So the plan you'll hear as the 100-day report, plan update, accelerated Iowa City's climate action plan is what it's actually called, and that is on our website. If you want to learn more about the supplemental plan, instead of 35 actions, there were 60 some actions. We keep adding to it. There's like 65 actions now. I'm sure we'll add more as the years go on and new technology emerges. There's still those 5 categories. So we have building, transportation, waste, adaptation, and sustainable lifestyle. I want to bring your attention to this pie graph. So this is community emissions by source in 2022. The biggest portion of that pie is buildings at 77%. Transportation, 19%, waste, 3%. All of it is important to address. The reason we focus on community emissions in buildings in our office specifically is that community owns 95% of emissions related to buildings. So the city, we control about 5%. So that's city operations in our buildings. We directly can address that, and we have done so. We are putting solar at the airport. We have it on the public works building, and we're trying to get more efficient buildings built when we build new buildings. Like our public works building is a new building that's highly efficient. So we are already working on that. We just need to figure out how can we help the community draw down their emissions related to buildings when we don't have direct control over that. So this graph is where we're at today. We're not going to have the 2023 emissions inventory until probably about end of July, beginning of August. We'll have it before September for sure, but our analyst, Daniel Bissell, he has to get all the information from all of the sources like Mid-American DOT. He calculates it for us, and then we'll put out a new report. But this is what we have so far. As you can see, there's a lot of fluctuation, which is perfectly normal. There's a huge dip between 2014 and 2015, and that was mostly due to Mid-American Energy. They pushed out a lot of wind energy at that time, built more turbines, and that's why we have that huge reduction in emissions. And then there's another dip in between 2019 and 2020, partially due to the pandemic, yes. But again, that was another hard hitting activity for Mid-American. They produced, I think it was 1.5 turbines in 2020. They built that 1.5, about 1.5 per day. So that was a huge reason why we had the dip in 2020. And we did go below our 2030 goal at that time. However, we jumped back up in 2021. I know that it looks like we hit it in 2022, but we did not. It was like 45.5% reduction. So we haven't hit the 2030 goal yet. We anticipate that it will fluctuate a few more times before it goes below that 45 reduction and stays there. Like I said, fluctuation's perfectly normal. So here's examples of recent progress, only some of them. We have a lot of grants awarded to community based organizations, businesses. We have energy saving kits delivered to households, over 2,000 so far. We contributed to a regional EV readiness plan. Over 1,000 homes just in Iowa City have received home energy audits since 2016 due to our Green Iowa AmeriCorps team efforts. And over 1,000 Root for Tree vouchers have been redeemed since the program started. And we have grants awarded to help build resilience hubs in partnerships with community-based organizations. I mentioned some of this already with the community action grants and innovation grants. I talked about how building is 77% of the pie for community emissions. One of the things that our office does to help bring down those emissions, we have a energy efficient insulation grant for income qualified homeowners in Iowa City, and the city pays in full for you to increase your attic insulation. So that's one of the opportunities we have for community members. Another thing we really want to focus on is community engagement activities. Zach mentioned the heat mapping campaign. We called it Spot the Hot. So we partnered with CAPA and NOAA and City of Cedar Rapids, and that heat mapping campaign launched last summer, and it was pretty successful. We have the report and map online if you're interested. We have a annual Climate Fest event, happens every September. This is a week-long event, and it happens all around the city for all ages, different events. And we have a climate action newsletter we send out every month that has news, tips, special events, and it has opportunities in it. So I encourage you, if you're interested in climate action, to sign up to receive that if you haven't already. We have an ongoing program, Climate Ambassador Program, where community members learn more about city operations and our climate action plan. They kind of get to deep dive into it with city staff, and that's ongoing. We have it once or twice a year. The cohort just started, the new cohort. And we have an annual energy blitz. And this is my little pitch to sign up to be a volunteer for our annual energy blitz in April. It's always around Earth Day. This year it's April 20th. If you're interested, it's icgov.org/energy blitz. What volunteers do is they go out in the morning to a priority neighborhood, deliver energy saving kits to households, pick up the kits in the afternoon, and those are filled with batteries and light bulbs, and we dispose of those properly for them. That's kind of what our office does in a nutshell. Any questions? And you can reach me at my office or my email if you think of things later on. No? Awesome. If you think of something, email.
Also, the plates and the forks are compostable, so there's a little box right here. You're done with it. You or Chrissy, if it's a matter. Okay.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My portion here is on, I'm gonna look specifically at trees and prairies. But my role with the city, my name's Tyler Baird. I'm Superintendent of Parks and Forestry. So that covers a whole lot of different things. you know, we've got trees all over town, whether that's street trees kind of spread out. We've got almost 60 parks now. We've got a couple more that'll come online in the next year or two. So we're really all over town. The trees and the prairies and the other park spaces are very visible. So that's what I'm going to focus on, like the visual progress for climate change. We're the thing that people see that really is a key indication of what the city is doing. So climate change, big black screen because it's kind of scary. It's not black and white. Things change constantly with it. I don't know the last time we had a winter like this. It's setting us up for a pretty scary spring and summer here for our plants and things out in our parks. But the visual things that go along with climate change, we have things like monarchs, things that really call us to action. So that's something that our parks can give the benefit of. So to have monarchs, you have to have prairies or other plants. So really keeping in mind that everything we do, we're doing to try to show people in town what they can do as well. So like Megan spoke of buildings, the city doesn't own most of the buildings in town. Well, the city doesn't own most of the trees in town or yard space or any of those types of things. So what we do on our small kind of piece of the pie, we're hopefully showing others what they can do in their own lives. Similar to what Zach talked about with his experience too, or what the county has been showing with their solar programs and things like that. So that's really my biggest goal, and my job is not just providing those things that we provide in our parks and our urban forests, but showing people what they can do as well. So there's something that's called spirit of place or genus loci. This is something I learned in my undergrad experience in landscape architecture. So what that means for me in Iowa, and my first thing I'm going to focus on here is prairies. Iowa was prairie predominantly when it was settled by Europeans. And since then, we've really changed the place or the spirit of the place. Most of those prairies are now agricultural fields or cities or other spaces. But where we can provide or put back prairie really brings us back to that thing that roots us in this place. So you can kind of see grasslands over the whole world, pretty widespread. Or what they used to be as pretty widespread. So there you see a little close up of the US and North America really. Tall grass prairie was what Iowa was pretty predominantly, and where it wasn't prairie, it was savanna. Iowa City probably would add a little bit more forest still along the river corridor, but really prairie was what dominated. And in my career, I've moved around the US a little bit. I ended up back home, but when I was in my other places where I either studied or worked, these prairie type ecosystems where it always drew me or what my favorite part of those areas were the prairie type ecosystems. So when I was living near the Basin Steppe, it was the big open spaces or the Palouse grasslands or the California grasslands. Or even the more of the mixed prairie space, which you get further west in Iowa. So what we're doing in Iowa City with prairies, we're trying to put them where they make sense throughout our park systems. So all those stars you see there are different individual prairies that we have added. And you'll see the colors there represent the different sizes of those. So some of those yellow ones are pretty small. They're less than 1/4 of an acre. But just like Becky was talking about the Prairie Pockets program that they're going to be implementing, those small spaces can make a difference. They can show people what prairies look like. And while not specifically a prairie, the space around City Hall, for instance, or the rec center downtown here, or some of our other areas around are all examples of what prairie-like ecosystems can look like and bring on a small scale, and what people could implement in their own yards as well. Then you see some of the bigger ones. We've got Waterworks Prairie Park, which is the top one on the screen there. That is our largest prairie complex within the city. And it's really got a nice feel when you go out there. It's not going to feel exactly like the native prairie did, where all you could see along the horizon were prairie, but it'll give you a good indication of what prairie can be like. And it being a larger size like that, there are added benefits with the ecosystem and with the ability to capture carbon and store carbon as well. Like I say, prairies are visual. You know, they get some bad connotations sometimes. I will say we haven't always been the best at recreating prairie, whether that's in the city here or anywhere else you see around. But when they're done right, they can be very beautiful. And that's what we're trying to do now, use our management techniques to make sure they're visually appealing. So when we do go to implement new prairie spaces, we don't have pushback on people thinking that, you know, it's just going to be a weed patch or look like a weed patch. So you have a question back there? Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there are quite a few different vendors throughout the area. I would recommend using seed that is from at least a Midwest vendor. Some of them that we've gotten seeds from in the past would be Alumni Seed Company, and you can find them online. Shooting Star Native Seeds, and then there's Ion Exchange and some others around as well. And if you do it correctly, you can harvest from some places. I would just check with the entity that owns the space before harvesting on there. Good question. So just some pictures of how prairies change throughout the year. This prairie is at Ryerson's Woods. We burned this a couple weeks ago, so hopefully it looks beautiful. Again, you kind of see with prairies, they have kind of little ecosystems or communities amongst themselves. So you see the different colors and textures. Those are all different plant groups that are kind of competing, but working together there. This isn't a city prairie, but it's just north of town a little ways. It gives you another idea of just the seasonality of prairies and how beautiful they can be even in the fall time. This was when I was doing a volunteer effort to harvest some seeds that were used from this site in another portion of this property. Like I spoke a little bit earlier, we have been doing spring burns. We are done in town for the year. Something we really look at for our burning in the city that isn't as big of a factor outside of city limits is our smoke and the impacts that makes. So we try to limit the smoke disturbance as much as possible on the surrounding neighborhoods, picking the right days to burn, the right wind directions. And right now you've noticed that this spring is really warm and we've gotten a couple of rains. So everything's starting to green up. So we're about a month ahead of normal. We would typically be starting burning this time of year, but we are concluded for this year. We did a couple of good burns, one at Sand Prairie Park, a small one at City Park. This was City Park the year before this last one. We did a larger one at Hickory Hill Park as well. And what those burns do is, yes, they do release some carbon back into the atmosphere, but they're improving that prairie and the root system of that prairie. So the prairie is going to sequester that carbon underground better the more it is managed and burned regularly. So you do get a trade-off, a small burst of carbon output, but then hopefully with good management of that prairie, we're actually a carbon sink. Then here's an example similar to the program the county is going to have of what you can do in your own landscape. This is at my house. It is a little bigger than 10 by 10, but it's probably 30 by 30 space. Most of my yard is landscape, but this section specifically has a lot of natives in a prairie-like mosaic. I used plugs for this. So what plugs are is the root zone's about yay big, a small little plant to start with. They just get you a little bit quicker start than if you were just to put seed out there, and you can control what species are in what spot a little bit more. So you have a kind of a tidier look to your yard in that instance. So that's one way that you can do it in your own space. And this always has bees, butterflies, everything that I didn't see at all when I moved into my home that I see quite regularly now. And it's also a great place to throw the extra compost scraps if you don't use them for worms or whatever. So I'm not putting that into the landfill as well, because it'll just decompose and become soil there. So it's all a balancing act though. With prairies and forest or any of our spaces, we're balancing different things. So we don't want to just have all prairie in our open spaces, because we still want to have open space for soccer, throwing the frisbee, anything like that. So we recognize that, but we use prairie where it's smart to use prairie. The next portion I'm going to talk about is where we use forest, or what we call our urban forest. And that is really good at things like reducing heat island effect. So the spot the hot type of program lets us know where we need to put trees in town to make those neighborhoods more livable, especially as our climate warms. So does anyone have any idea of what any of these species of trees are here? I don't know how many. We have any botanists or foresters or anyone just kind of interested in trees that might know? Zach probably knows because he's done some education on this, but. Well, I can start on the on your left there. That was the first kind of mass extinction pretty much of a tree in the US. That was the American chestnut tree. So this is back before any of us can remember. But chestnut blight came through. It was a disease that wasn't a problem for chestnut trees in other parts of the world, but when it came here, our trees didn't have defenses for that. And it has essentially wiped out all the chestnut trees in the US. There's some research going on to try to have some resistant trees that could be reintroduced, but definitely a big impact on the landscape of all of the eastern US, almost from the Mississippi to all the way to the East Coast. The middle there, some of you, most of us would remember when these were more prevalent. Any guesses on that one? So that's elm. So Dutch elm disease, really 70s, 80s came through this area pretty, it was devastating to our street trees. And there are still some elms left around, but one thing that's the bright side on elms is we have been able to get some more cultivars reintroduced. So you do see elms, they're not going to be your just American traditional like elm that you had before, but science has kind of caught up with that. So we're able to use elms some again. And then the far right, everyone should probably be able to guess this one with the trend we're going here. It's what everyone planted after the elms were taken out. So those are ash. So everyone's probably familiar with emerald ash borer from the last, pretty much decade now. It's been really prevalent in Iowa City. We are in the process of pretty much removing every single ash tree if we're not treating them for emerald ash borer. So what the borer does, it gets under the bark in that layer where the trees uptake water. and kind of exchange nutrients back and forth with the roots and the leaves. And they tunnel around and cut off all those pathways of nutrients. So the tree slowly dies and the tree becomes, in this case, brittle and quite a hazard. So that is the main reason we've had to really focus on removing these when we see that emerald ash forest set in, because they can be a hazard to the surrounding properties or users of those space. What have we learned from this? Well, hopefully, and you see it a lot more, but diversity of species. Now when we plant trees, we're going back with not just ash trees to replace all the elms, but to replace all the ash trees, 20, 25 different species to replace those. And not just different species, but different genus as well. So if you think back to high school biology, a lot of species within a genus are very similar. The genuses across nature tend to have the differences. So where emerald ash borer will impact green ash, white ash, blue ash, all the ashes, it's typically not going to impact something in another genus. And most pests are like that, not exclusively, but to a certain extent. And so kind of the next thing with trees is we need action. And for action for us is showing the community what they can do with trees, getting them involved in planting efforts. So I'll do a plug as well. We've got a planting effort this year we'll be doing at Oakland Cemetery with some help from some funding from the Heritage Tree Group. They're a group that was established at least a couple of decades ago and really put a lot of effort into educating the community of our heritage trees, or our big older trees in town. Well, now we're using some of that funding that they were able to secure over the years to start the next heritage trees. So the younger trees that are going to replace some of those. So if anyone wants to come help us, the day after Arbor Day, it's going to be April 27th. It's a Saturday morning, 9 o'clock at the Oakland Cemetery. We'll be planting 77 trees with the help of volunteers to really help bring some more canopy back to parts of the cemetery. What's probably more important to us, you see the two city workers on the photo. They've both been working with the city and our forestry department for over 30 years. And I think our whole forestry department takes seriously that we're not planting for ourselves, we're planting for the next generation. So we like to get kids involved each year as well. This was a few years ago at Willow Wind School, where for Arbor Day, we helped them plant a tree, helped them kind of do the hands-on portion after they had learned in the classroom. They were able to do their part of throwing some soil in to the hole. And then they're able to see these trees throughout the seasons as they come to school, or a lot of them over the years that we've helped plant there have been in their playground space. So it's really getting kids involved to be the next ones that go into the field like Zach is going into, or come work for us at the city, or go to other places to spread the message as well. Okay, a couple trivia things for everyone. Can anyone guess what 35% might represent as far as trees and Iowa City? Any guesses? Yes, got it. So canopy coverage. So this is, I did use an online tool this last winter where I looked at a lot of images and said, is there a tree in this point, or is there not a tree in this point, or is it some other sort of coverage that gives an idea of statistically, if you do enough points, you get an idea of how much canopy coverage you have over the whole city. So right now we're sitting right at about 35%. It was like 35.5%, but it was plus or minus, so like 1.5% of that. So our goal would be closer to 40%. But this 35%, I think is a a good place to sit right now with the amount of ash trees that we've lost throughout town and the impacts of the derecho, the impacts of the ongoing droughts we've been having. So 35%, I think we're going in the right direction with that. And we're only planting more and more trees. So hopefully this number continues to go up. And this 35% doesn't just represent the efforts of the city on city property, but the efforts of the community as well. So things like you saw on Megan's screen earlier, she didn't touch on as much, but the Root for Trees program, where you can apply through the office that Megan works in for 50% off a tree to put in your yard, up to $125 off. So that'd be if you had a $250 tree, you could get half of that price covered. And this is something we thought of before the derecho, and then it actually happened to be coming online right around that time. So sometimes you're lucky. It looked like we were just super quick and responsive. Well, we'd already been planning it, so it was good timing for us. But that's helped get thousands of trees in the ground throughout Iowa City in spots that we wouldn't usually be able to impact. So we can plant trees in rights of way, and we can plant trees in parks, but those yard spaces are what we'd like to promote planting in as well to help us get this number up. Because even if we planted in all of our right of way locations, we probably would just barely be able to get to 40%. Okay, 750. Anyone have a guess on that? Ooh, good guess, but I don't think we have quite 750 for species, but that would be great if we did. We'd have more and more options. 750 is our goal, our annual goal for new trees that we're planting around town through Parks and Forestry Division. 775. That's what we've hit for our number over the past 4 years. And keep in mind that had the COVID year in there. So the COVID year, we had about 400. So that pulls our total down a little bit. So we've been reaching that goal thanks in large part to our staff and their dedication to plant trees, the help of volunteers around funding that city council has designated for us to be able to pay for these trees. And then we've leveraged that funding to get grants as well. So each year we've been pulling in grant money to help with a lot of those volunteer planting projects. So that's a number we're proud of this year. We have at least that many planned. I don't know the total number yet, but I think we're going to be closer to 850, 900 that will be hopefully getting in the ground this year. Okay, I'm close to the end here. So here's one more tree for you, just a little trivia. And to get to know me a little bit better here as we close. Can anyone guess what this tree is? Yes, Becky got it. It's hopcorn beam. So this is my favorite tree and a tree that I don't think is planted enough. If you're looking for a tree to plant this spring, you know, any tree is better than no tree, but please don't pick a maple. We have about 30 or more % maples in town. To give you an idea, ash trees, we had about 13% when we started removing all those. If a pest comes through for maples, it's definitely going to impact us greatly. So the more different species we can plant, the better. What I like about hopcorn beam, if you go through our native forest around Iowa, it's the one you always see in the winter with leaves still hanging on. It's all throughout the understory or kind of the mid-story. It's got the cool hop-looking fruits on it. It's got nice bark. It's got good shape. It's about 30 by 30. It fits in most yards, kind of a medium size. So I love other natives like oaks and stuff too. But if you have a smaller yard, or if you need a good small shade tree to put somewhere that's not overplanted right now, this is one to use. Now, even if we all planted these, we still wouldn't come up with a percentage of these that's going to be too many. So just something to think about when you're going to the nursery to buy trees. Go find something that there may only be one or two of out there. Talk to the people on the nursery lot and ask them what they would recommend that not everyone might be planting a lot of, because the more we can do to diversify, the better we're going to be. Because the more trees we keep alive and surviving through stressors, whether it's insects or other disease or drought, the better we're going to be for our climate, because of the more carbon that stays stored in that way. And that is what I have. Do anyone have any questions or anything on that? Zach was first. He was really quick.
So I want, first, is being aware that the online interactive inventory that the product is not.
Yep, that's a good question. Yes, we have switched from what we did when we did our original tree inventory was tree plotter. And we have switched from that product to our larger citywide now GIS mapping and inventory system, which is called Cartograph. And we will hopefully get it back online, but it's not in a state to be online at this point. But yes, we hope to get that back up there. So what that inventory did was map all the trees in town. So prior to switching over, you could see kind of what tree was where. If you weren't sure what was in front of your house, anything on city property, you could click on. So ideally, that'll be back up and running soon. Good question.
Talk about the process of identifying where and what type of trees how
Yeah, that's great. So all those things are what we think of. So something called right tree, right place is what kind of the industry calls things. But then also, and you talked about it a little bit in your presentation, Zach, about getting trees into areas where that may be underserved historically. But doing so in a way that's also not going to gentrify the area too much that it displaces those residents. So we've been trying to focus on planting and the rights of way of some of our streets that don't have any trees. And a lot of those tend to be areas where they were built in, well, before we had all the standards that we have now for a development. So they were probably built in the 70s through the 90s. And a lot of those spaces that didn't get trees may have been rental properties or places like that where the property owners didn't perceive the value that the trees actually bring to the property. So trying to plant in some of those neighborhoods where we can. Sometimes we run against prior planning decisions. So the right of way might not be wide enough. So it's typically the space between the sidewalk and the curb. If that's less than 6 feet, we're going to have a hard time getting a tree to grow in that space in a healthy way. So snow, places to put snow, that impacts those trees. Once they're big and tall, it's not a big issue for them, but when they're young, plowing operations and things like that in the winter can impact them. Also picking the right trees for areas that could get too much salt in the winter. From road treating operations, trees that are going to withstand our droughts. We invest a lot of time into watering our new trees when we plant them. And this year, we're starting off even more drought stricken than last year. And we spent a whole lot of time. So trying to figure out which species are going to do best in our changing climate. And what we've been doing for that is trying a bunch of different things and seeing what works the best. Let's see, other things for right tree, right place, looking up and also getting utilities located underground when you go to plant. So if we're planting under power lines, you're not going to get a nice, beautiful shade tree. You may get a nice, beautiful spring flowering tree, but there's benefits to each. There's also benefits to mixing overstory and understory trees, so they're more in a natural kind of setting. So if you go through a forest, you're gonna have both. You're not just gonna have tall trees and short trees. Something in this picture here, this is Upper City Park. You don't see as much of the understory. So as we can in places, you see a couple of little trees planted there, but trying to get that next either generation of large trees or some of the smaller trees underneath. So lots of things to think about when you're planting. If you're planting at your home, making sure you don't put that tree right next to your house. I see that quite often. That can become an issue as well. Yeah, good question. Question? Shrubs are great too, and something that I think everyone has a place for a shrub, even if you can't fit a tree. Recommended natives, viburnums, viburnum, nine bark, trying to think, depends on your setting for some of them. Those are two that we use quite often. There's some other non-natives that are okay as well. If you want an evergreen, I mean, they can look a little dated, but yews are always going to do well. Some of the junipers will probably live pretty well, but they don't. Sometimes they have kind of that stuck in the 90s look too. So it just depends on what you're going for. And then shoot, I kind of at a loss for other ones right now, but if you go with a nine bark or a viburnum, there's quite a few different ones of those. You can get a cultivar or a straight native species. There's colors and sizes of all of them that will do well almost anywhere for those. Another one, not necessarily native, but oak leaf hydrangea does pretty well in the shade. So if you've got a shady spot and want some flowers, I wouldn't go with the hydrangeas you would see on all of the magazines from Martha Stewart, but those grow real well on the East Coast, but here the oak leaf ones grow a little bit better for us. Question? Back? Yep. Yep, that's a good question. So one way to help with that is to plant the diversity that we kind of talked about. Ideally, we could plant, if we were doing a whole neighborhood, we could plant, a third of it one year, a third the next year, and the last third, 5 or 10 years later. For scale of operations and getting everything watered and everything, we usually try to plant as much as we can of the whole neighborhood in one shot. Whether that's right or wrong, it makes our operations more efficient and can get more trees watered and keep them healthy that way. But one thing that we have been doing for a long time is what we call our infill planting. So in an established neighborhood, let's say we've got trees that come down from a storm like the one we had this winter, or the derecho, or other storms like that. We'll go in, and as the residents request the trees, or if we see a hole, we may reach out to a resident and say, hey, would a tree work here for you? Is it something that would that you're looking for? Because it fits our goals, then we can plant newer trees in kind of those established areas as well. And then as the residents can help us with that too by planting in their yard, kind of as unfortunately, the whole development usually gets built at once and the trees all planted and then sometimes forgotten about at the same time frame. So you'll have a lot of 1 or 2 cultivars, not even just the species, but 1 or 2 cultivars of a species that if you have something come through that harms them, then yeah, you're not sitting good, but trying to go back and replace in spots is our biggest way to make that better, I guess. Other questions? Yeah. No, you right right here. Yeah. Yes. Okay. That's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a question we get quite often if there's removal of any kind of vegetation along a waterway or whatnot. That was in conjunction with Public Works Department. So our streams function in a couple of different ways. And those really to move the water from those neighborhoods and for mitigation of flooding risk and things like that. Those trees were predominantly growing in the banks that were unstable, and they were, the undergrowth was mostly, well, primarily 99% non-native species that were shading out the banks of those slopes. And then you lose all of your grasses or your other, herbaceous layer at that ground height. And then that becomes more prone to erosion, and the banks can then fall in and cause issues that way with erosion and sedimentation of the areas. So in some of those instances, I believe there was one large tree that was left there that was able to be saved, but most of them came out. And across where the prairie was, we kept some that was along an old fence line there, but unfortunately, the rest in that case were compromised by the old fence line and had growth and decay and defects that we chose to remove those at that point. But yeah, sometimes you will see trees come down. Another instance along across from the VA along Highway 6 there. That was full of mostly ash trees that were starting to fail and break off and fall into the road every time we had a storm. So you will see larger scale projects sometimes that remove more. But in the instance with Scott Park there along Court Street, we went back in with prairie or other vegetation that will improve that area and help hold the soil in place too. So do we lose some of that carbon sequestration from the trees? Yes. Do the prairies bring it back? Yes. And there are studies out there that prairie actually does a better job of sequestering carbon than trees even. So sometimes there's a trade-off in that way too. Yeah, good question. You know this? Yeah, back there. Okay. Hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good question. With new development, there tends to be kind of ordinances or stuff built into the planning documents of those developments. I won't get too much into that because I would know just enough to tell you wrong, because that's a whole side of the planning department that looks into those regulations and things like that. But as far as private property in general, no, there isn't. If you have like a neighbor that takes down a tree, there's nothing that currently says that they have to put one back in that instance. Yep. And so a lot of what you're seeing come down right now around town, or what I've noticed, is our ash trees. You can't always tell at this time of year which ones aren't going to be alive coming into spring, but I can tell you almost every one I've seen around, unless the person is treating it for EAB, they're in decline and starting to become hazards in that way. Awesome. Well, thank you all.
Yeah. Yeah, snacks, drinks.
Do we need a bathroom break for everyone? Okay, people.
No, yeah,
So-
that's what we're fine. Oh, it's all good, yeah. That's what we got from the big ones, yeah.
Good. We have, I'm actually gonna talk about it here.
Yeah, that's what-
We have approval for it. People were the buses today. and I'd love to go over the buses today. But we have some other issues before we can get these that, but we also got a federal grant for the transit facility. So that's gonna go down, where public works is, Gilbert and the college there, just for the buses. So it's not gonna be like a solution. That kind of thing, kind of like what a transit facility is now, except
Yeah.
no methane abatement system or,
Yeah.
I think you have a perfect spot. I know they're gonna go to the police department. It'd be a great spot for them, but they're gonna have some issues that we're having with it. Of course, nothing. So are y'all part of Wilch program? So Iowa Green, yeah. Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. We go ahead and keep going again. Okay. My name is Christina Jones. I am the management analyst for transportation services for the city of Iowa City. That encompasses both our transit operations as well as our parking operations. That's a new position for the city that just, sorry, I didn't project. That was new, newly approved, I want to say in 2022, and I came on in December of that year. Prior to working with the city, I was a consulting transportation planner, working with communities throughout the US, up into Canada, as far west as Honolulu, as far east as Winter Park, Florida, which is one of the suburbs of Orlando. Edmonton, Canada, down to parts of Texas. So all over. And really was focused on parking at that point and reducing parking. So it kind of came into transit as a way of reducing our parking needs so that we aren't having to pave paradise, if you will. Kind of what I wanted to touch on today was what our goals are as the city was looking to electrify our fleet. Some of the challenges that we saw with that and continue to see with that program, even as we expand it. And then going forward into the future, what we're looking to do next. Our goals, as others have touched on, so I won't get too far into it, but reducing the city's carbon emissions. We do have some pretty progressive and aggressive goals related to that. Using clear fuel sources, primarily electricity, to accomplish those goals, but also to improve the passenger and our drivers' experiences when they're riding transit, and then to lower our long-term maintenance costs, both in terms of our fleet vehicles and the facility where we store and maintain those vehicles. So a lot of the challenges that we've faced come from just simply the size of the electric buses. They are getting smaller as technology improves, but it's a slow process. And the difference, if you look at one of our legacy diesel buses compared to one of the Prairies that we have out on the streets now, is considerable. They are a couple feet longer, a couple inches taller, which doesn't sound like a lot, but as we'll get into, that has proven to be a significant challenge for us to overcome. Range anxiety is something that individuals experience with their passenger vehicles, with their EVs, and that's something that we experience here at the city as well with our buses. Iowa has pretty extreme climates, both in the summer and in the winter, and we really feel those effects during the winter when we're getting down below zero, not only with the electric buses, but our diesel buses will start to gel up and they just can't run. But with the electric buses, we start to see that range decrease as the cold weather kind of sucks that energy out of batteries. So, as I mentioned, one of the greatest challenges that we have is just simply the size of the electric buses. This is our existing transit facility out here off of South Riverside Drive. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight for you was that this facility is literally sinking into the ground. So if you pay attention to the little pillars here, I'm going to highlight them. At one point, those were all the same height. Luckily, our building is on a solid bedrock, but it is on the former site of the city dump. So literally up to the threshold of our garage doors, it's sinking at different paces, at different points throughout the year. So we keep adding asphalt, building up those approaches, but at the same time, it is limiting our ability to get the buses into the garage. This is really due to what's called the breakover point. So if you think of it as, that it ramps up and then it levels out as you go into the bus barn. The buses are rigid. So you have a board going over a tripod. The breakover point is where there's enough weight at the front of the bus to get it to tip forward. So until it does that, it can clip the top of the garage there. That's where it comes into play that I mentioned. These are just a couple inches taller, a couple feet longer, but it is a very tight fit. This is the same model of the Proterra electric buses that we have on the road now. This is the demo bus that they brought out prior to us purchasing those. And one of the challenges that we posed to them was show us that it can fit into our facilities as it sits today. As you'll see here, we focused on adding a little bit more asphalt to the approach, especially in those far right lanes, because that's where our charging units are for those buses. But it just took that grade out a little further, reduced the steepness of that to reduce that breakover point of those electric buses, so that they're able to get in and out without bouncing and hitting the top, and just gives us a little bit more flexibility over the long term. This is just one of our electric buses, the Proterra. But the big differences that you'll see here are there's the HVAC system, which on a diesel bus is usually at the back of the bus. And there's also a couple batteries up top, and then the blue rectangular bar that kind of runs along the side. That's where most of the batteries are stored on the electric buses. They're actually underneath of it, which they have a lot of weight to them. So during the winter, when it's snowy out, these actually handle a little bit better on slick conditions than some of our diesel buses do because of the additional weight. But that is where a lot of that additional height comes from that our legacy buses don't have. Another area where this height came into play was the Iowa Avenue Bridge. As you can see here, the sign indicates that it's 10 feet, 5 inches. This is actually 10 feet, 8 inches. We know because our buses are 10 feet, 5 inches, and we took one out there. Again, we asked them to drive the demo bus underneath of it. They weren't too thrilled with us, but it did fit. They had to go very slowly because any amount of bumps were definitely going to scrape. So as you can see, our mechanics and our associate director are out there filming. Yeah, it made it under. There was no damage to the bus or the bridge, but this is something that we have to take into consideration when we are looking at these electric buses. I will say in August 2022, we realigned a lot of our routes. So we only have one route now that goes under the Iowa Avenue Bridge, and we just don't put our electric buses on that one as a safety precaution. Don't want to take the chance, not only for the damage, but these are very expensive vehicles. So with that, one of the challenges I mentioned is also just the range that these vehicles have. As you can see, our routes cover pretty well the entire incorporated city area. But so terminology here for those who aren't from the transit industry is you have a route. That's what we all know. 1 through 13. 1 is the South Iowa City, 2 is Court Street, and so forth. But you have runs. A run is a collection of routes, and that's generally tied to the driver. If I'm out driving a run, I might cover Route 5, for example, the Lower Muscatine route, and that runs every hour, but it only takes half an hour to drive that. So start from the downtown interchange, drive that route, come back. That bus will then turn into the 7 route, drive that one, come back, turn into the 5 route, drive that, come back, so on and so forth. Even beyond that, you have a block, and that's tied to the bus. So that driver will cover their one run, several routes. But then at the end of that driver's shift, they jump off the bus, another driver jumps on, continues with their run, but on the same block. So our shortest block that a bus is out driving is actually the East Side Loop. That's about 13.5 miles. It's run twice a day, just one run each time, covering predominantly the schools. Our longest run though is just over 260 miles of continuously running the bus. I don't know if any of you have an electric vehicle, but typical range on an EV, you're looking around 220 miles under perfect conditions, not running the air conditioner, not running the heating, windshield wipers, any of that. So range is an issue that we continue to evaluate, and thankfully, as technology comes along and batteries improve and become lighter, we're looking forward to some of the newer buses being able to accommodate some of our longer blocks. Charging facilities, back to our site again, has been a big issue, but one name you've heard several times and have been a great partner to us is Mid-American Energy. They came out, and as you can see, the 2 white boxes here in the picture on the left side are 2 of our 3 chargers. The third one hadn't been installed yet. And the green box is the transformer. The amount of power that we draw to charge the buses was so great that they had to expand that entire block's electrical capacity just for those 4 vehicles. The image and the charging handle there on the right is the dispenser. So we have 4 dispensers within our building. And as you can see from the handle, they actually use just a standard EV plug. I can take my EV in there. We've actually taken some of the city's fleet vehicles in there when charge point chargers were down and gotten them to charge. The difference being, this is a direct current. So if you're familiar with the Tesla fast chargers, this will put those to shame. Our buses hooked up for a couple hours will gain about 45 minutes of range. But we took in one of our Chevy Bolts that our parking enforcement officers use. And within 45 minutes, it had gone from like a 10% charge up to almost 100% charged in less than an hour. I would love to hook my personal vehicle up to it. I don't think the city would be too fond of that. But yeah, these have been great. So as we look to expand our fleet, there's the upfront costs of the bus. One of the legacy diesel Gilligs that you see on the street costs, last time we procured one, just over $430,000. Whereas the electric Proteras, like the back end of the one we can see here, was just under $1 million for one bus. So we're talking doubling the cost of the bus up front. But over the long term, you have theoretically, I'll have to caveat this, lower maintenance costs. With an electric vehicle, just like if it's a passenger car, we don't have to change the oil on the electric buses. You don't have as many mechanical parts that can fail. Now, the reason I caveat this is those who aren't familiar with it, Proterra, who has basically market share, or they did have market share of electric buses worldwide, filed for bankruptcy earlier this year, late last year. This has been a huge impact to us because our buses are still under warranty. So the issues that they have, Proterra would come on site and fix those for us. now that they're under bankruptcy, the company that has bought them out, while they are based in the US now, still has a travel ban in place. So we can't get Proterra's mechanics here to fix the buses. They have come to the point where they are saying, you know what? Take it to whatever mechanic you can find who is certified to work on an electric bus. We'll pay for it. The problem is we can't find a mechanic who is certified to work on these buses. So, Zach, if you're looking to get into anything after college, there's a big demand out there. Because yes, Proterra, they have most of the cities throughout the US who have gone the electric route, have Proterras. Pretty much all of Europe's electric buses are Proterras. Gillig, who has historically had the greatest market share of buses, period, in public transit, has released their own electric bus, and they actually brought one out in January, drove it here from California. They ran it for a full day in Des Moines on one of their routes, and then brought it here, of course, charging along the way. And this was mid-January when we were in typical Iowa weather, getting down below zero before the warm up occurred. So we were really impressed with how it performed, very excited about the opportunity. We asked them, you know, hey, we have funding to purchase more vehicles. If we order from you today, how long is it going to take? 2 years. So we are trying to expand, but there are constraints. As I mentioned, our facility is aging and it has some issues with the ground itself. Thankfully, more grants. Earlier this year, we announced we were approved just over 22 million from the federal FTA, excuse me, for 2 new electric buses and a new transit facility. So we're hoping to break ground on that later this year, and that new transit facility ideally will be open in 2027. So right now we're looking at what do we need for our current operational needs. Of course, we do have Fare Free, which has increased ridership considerably, and that is a pilot program for the next 2 years. Our hope is to continue that and to continue increasing our ridership. But with that, we do need more buses. We want to we want to expand with electric buses. But one of the drawbacks to electric buses is charging. As I mentioned, our blocks currently exceed the range capacity. So while charging technology is improving, it's not improving at the same rate that our needs for the electric buses is growing. So we're looking at charging infrastructure, how we can expand that in our current facility, but in a way that it can be transitioned to the new facility because of the significant costs that go into these and wanting to be good stewards of course, taxpayer money. So what's next? As I mentioned, we are not just transit. Transportation services is also the parking division. So we are looking to optimize our electric fleet. We do have, as I mentioned, the grant funding for 2 new buses from the feds. We also received funding from the state of Iowa for 4 new buses. That might be 4 from the feds, 2 from the state. We have 6 buses total that are paid for once we can get them here. I do know that 2 of those are required as part of those grants to be electric. But with electric, because of those charging needs, because of the range, we do have to have more spare buses. Currently, we have, I believe, 1 spare bus. So if a bus en route goes down, we can take that one out, swap it, tow the other one to our facilities for the maintenance crew to fix. But because of those warranty issues that we're experiencing with Proterra, the manufacturer, 2 of our electric buses have been out of commission for several months now. So that's something that we are working through and hoping to avoid in the future as we continue to expand the fleet. As I mentioned, we have our new facility that we are very excited about. That is going to be down on South Gilbert and McAllister, where the public works site is, closer to the corner. It's not going to be a passenger facility. It's going to be very similar to the existing transit facility where it's administrative offices, maintenance, storage, and so forth. But then we're also looking beyond just transit, as I mentioned, with parking. Two of our parking enforcement and maintenance vehicles are Chevy Bolts. And we just put out a procurement order for a Ford Maverick truck. That will again go to the parking fleet for enforcement and maintenance. That will be equipped with the license plate recognition cameras, which it's wonderful that these electric vehicles can support some of those add-on needs to our vehicles. But also the Maverick, we're really excited about because during those winter events, when it's too cold for enforcement officers to be out writing tickets on the street, which I'm sure you all appreciate, they actually go out and will help shovel snow at the transit stops. So having those trucks available means that they can throw the shovels in the back, the snow blowers, and help keep those stops clear for all of our passengers. So with that, what questions do you have? Go for it. We did just have a position close that was open for hiring. It's a supervisor position and it's not required of that role, but it was one of the preferred qualities or skill sets for that candidate was that they would be familiar with the electric buses and maintenance of those. Yep. That is something that we are looking to. We have a new fleet supervisor who he himself is hoping to go out and get that certification. And then for at least one of the other mechanics. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. We hear a lot about the experience just riding the electric buses. You know, people say they can actually sit and read a book while they're on the bus now. They don't have all of that noise pollution. Yeah.
She see the screen. What? Like. Here? Oh, yeah. And then your arrow keys right here.
Okay. Great. All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. I'm Jane Wilch. I'm the city's recycling coordinator, and today we're going to be talking about resource management in Iowa City. So when I say resource management, I am talking about our division name. So we are within the Public Works Department, and we are the Resource Management Division. But I am also talking about a systematic approach to how we deal with our materials. So when I talk about the Resource Management Division, it is a puzzle of three big pieces. So we're talking about drop-off recycling, which will delve into all the different pieces of that, curbside collection, and then all the different things going on at the Iowa City landfill as well. Okay, so drop-off recycling, lots of different images on the screen here. Battery recycling to glass, cardboard, light bulbs, lots of different types of materials. Drop-off recycling can look like a lot of different things. So we'll talk about all these different types of drop-off recycling.
all the different dots that we see on the map here. So we're not gonna delve into exactly what each of them are, on this map right here. But just know that this is kind of the aerial representation of how different drop-off recycling options are dispersed throughout the community. We are gonna talk about all these different programs as we come to the next few slides here. And then any questions that we have about our different recycling programs, I'll also have several QR codes as we go through this, so feel free to snap a picture of those. This one just goes to our main recycling webpage as well. Okay. How many of us have been to the East Side Recycling Center before? Show of hands. Few of us, great. Okay, so this is one of our main recycling hubs. This is over on Scott Boulevard on the east side of Iowa City. This is also where the Habitat for Humanity Restore is located, if any of us have ever shopped over there. This is where the Friends of Historic Preservation Salvage Barn is located. So 2 different secondhand stores where you can buy all sorts of different building materials, furniture, historically significant building materials, lots of cool stuff. And then we also have all the different recycling options at this location as well. So all the materials that you see listed there, we've got recycling options for all those different materials. And then through Restore donations, we also have partnerships with them for electronics, small appliances, and light bulb recycling as well. During spring, summer, and fall, we have compost and wood chip pickup at this location also. We don't have the bins out quite yet, but we will at the start of April. South Riverside Recycling Center. So this location, I do have it at the top here in bold. We are moving soon. So this is probably in the next 6 weeks going to be moving. Currently, this is at the intersection of South Riverside and Highway 6. This is going to be moving a little bit further down on South Riverside to match up with the new Sturgis Ferry Park. So we're going to have a boat ramp, a park, and a recycling center all in one. It's going to have the same recycling opportunities. It's going to be 24/7. So cardboard, plastic, metal, paper, and glass, similar to what we have here. Just a lot of other amenities that are